He was born on a cold November morning in a small brick house at the edge of Maplewood, a quiet suburb ringed by towering oaks whose leaves blazed red and gold each autumn. His parents, both public school teachers, named him Nathaniel James Hayes in honor of his great uncle who had served in the Air Force. From the moment he could crawl, he carried an insatiable curiosity, a fascination with how things worked, from the squeaky gears of his grandfather's pocket watch to the whir of their basement furnace. When he was 6, his father gave him a simple chemistry set. Small vials filled with colored powders and dried crystals became his first playground, and the kitchen sink quickly transformed into a makeshift laboratory where baking soda and vinegar volcanoes spewed foam across stained linoleum floors. His parents watched warily, reminding him to wear his safety goggles and never mix chemicals without supervision. That advice only fueled his determination, and by age 8, he was conducting experiments to calculate the pH of rainwater collected in mason jars after summer storms. He recorded his results in a tattered spiral notebook, pages crowded with diagrams of labeled beakers and pencil sketches of raindrops magnified under a hand lens. By the time he entered middle school at Maplewood Junior High, Nate had become known as the quiet boy with grease-stained fingers, always tinkering in the science lab after hours. He rarely spoke unless spoken to, but when he did, it was with a quiet confidence and a depth of understanding that surprised even his most skeptical teachers. In 8th grade, he began reading about solar energy and sustainable technologies. He stumbled across an article online about a scientist in India who built a solar-powered water purifier from discarded soda bottles and reflective surfaces. The simplicity and potential impact fascinated him. He read every report he could find on desalination processes, reverse osmosis, and solar stills, scribbling notes in the margins of his well-worn notebooks. One evening after school and homework were done, he spread out his materials across the kitchen table and sketched the first rudimentary diagram of what would become his solar-powered desalination device. In his design, a parabolic reflector would concentrate sunlight onto a transparent chamber filled with seawater. As the water heated, it would produce pure vapor that would then condense on a cool, slanted surface and trickle down into a separate collection tube. He envisioned the device serving coastal communities where access to clean drinking water was scarce. His heart thrummed with excitement at the thought that one day his invention could save lives. That year, he enrolled in Mrs. Langston's science class, a kind middle-aged woman who encouraged creativity but stressed adherence to the standard curriculum. At the first opportunity, during a class assignment on renewable energy, Nate asked if he could present his device instead of writing a traditional report on wind turbines. Mrs. Langston, still relatively new to teaching, smiled gently and said, "Nathaniel, that sounds fascinating, but for this assignment, I need you to cover what the rest of the class is covering. We'll have time later in the semester for special projects." Nate nodded, though his shoulders slumped as he returned to his seat. He held on to his sketches for weeks, revising technical details, whenever he had a spare moment between band practice and homework. It wasn't that he disliked the assignment he was given. He performed well on the wind turbine report, earning a high mark, yet he felt exiled from his true passion. He added more notes to his spiral. Test the reflective angle. Find cost-effective materials. Consider aluminum foil or mylar instead of polished metal. In 9th grade, he approached his new science teacher, Mr. Rogan, at the start of the term and asked if he could work on a self-directed project. Mr. Rogan, an imposing figure with a buzz cut and rimless glasses, eyed Nate coolly. "If you finish your assigned labs early, you may have free time for personal work," he said. "But don't expect me to devote class time to supervising experiments outside the curriculum." Despite the careful phrasing, he would have free time, only if all else was complete. Nate seized the opportunity. During the final period on Wednesdays, when a lingering period of independent study was scheduled, he set up his station at the back of the classroom. With laptops open and reference books piled beside him, he drafted a proposal to simulate solar energy capture in a computer modeling program he downloaded from the school's software library. He spent hours fiddling with parameters: sunlight intensity, chamber temperature, condensing surface area. Janitors would find him asleep over the keyboard late afternoon, elbows propping him up as night janitorial carts rumbled past the lockers. He never minded staying late. To him, the empty school smelled of possibility, like a canvas awaiting a fresh coat of paint. Outside the classroom, social dynamics flashed past him like a television on fast forward. Ninth graders clustered around lockers, whispering gossip about weekend parties. Nate had a small circle of friends. Alyssa from his math class, brilliant at algebra, who helped him with the calculus projections required for the energy equations. Carlos, who shared his fascination with electronics, dismantling old radios in the woodshop to salvage motors and gears, and Maya, his younger sister, whose enthusiasm for robotics and coding often inspired him to incorporate microcontrollers into his projects. They sat together in the cafeteria under the flickering fluorescent lights, sharing snacks and animated debates on whether wireless power transmission would be feasible in their lifetimes. Yet beyond that circle, the halls could feel cold, and Nate often felt his eyes glaze as he navigated the sea of human energy that pulsed around him, like a wanderer in a foreign land. In the winter of his sophomore year, the school announced its annual Innovation Showcase, a coveted event where students could volunteer to present projects to parents, community members, and a panel of local engineers. If selected, participants would receive a small grant to further refine their prototypes. Nate stayed up nights, drafting an application to present his desalination device, designing polished presentation boards that delineated materials, cost estimates, and potential impact. His parents watched him in awe as he meticulously sketched updated diagrams on graph paper. One evening, his father asked, "Nathaniel, why do you spend so much time on this? You could just complete your schoolwork and be fine." Nate looked up from his drawings, eyes bright. "Dad, if I can show them this works, maybe we can get real funding. Maybe I can bring clean water to people who need it." His mother hovered at the threshold, wiping her hands on a dish towel, and offered a gentle nod, though her worry showed in the crease between her eyebrows. As he mailed the application, he felt a surge of hope. Weeks later, a letter came. He was selected as one of only 5 students to present at the Innovation Showcase. The announcement dashed across email and hallway buzz, and Nate felt momentarily disoriented by the attention. He spent the next 2 months preparing his prototype, a sturdier glass chamber encased in a lightweight aluminum frame, a custom-designed parabolic mirror cut from reflective sheet metal, and a small thermoelectric pump powered by a portable solar panel that he borrowed from Carlos's father. He practiced his presentation in front of Alyssa and Carlos in the woodshop after school, rehearsing lines like, "The device yields up to 2 liters of potable water per hour under optimal conditions," and responding to tough questions they posed. How do you prevent bacterial growth in the chamber? Have you considered using reverse osmosis? What materials can withstand the corrosive nature of brackish water? His answers grew sharper each day. He even built a miniature plastic sandbox near the school's greenhouse to test his device using water he mixed with salt and sand to mimic ocean water. The afternoon sun would drift through the glass panes and warm his experiment, and he collected fresh liquid samples in small vials, running them through litmus strips to confirm their neutrality. The sandbox had become his second classroom, a space where he could tinker and measure real-world variables. Finally, the day arrived. The Innovation Showcase unfolded in the school's multi-purpose room, converted into a makeshift exhibition hall. Rows of folding tables held projects of all kinds, computer programs that predicted student stress levels, small wind turbines carved from PVC pipe, a robotic arm that could play tic-tac-toe. Nate set up his station at the far corner, erecting his polished display boards behind the gleaming desalination device. His hands shook as he affixed his name tag over his heart. Nathaniel Hayes, Solar Desalination Project. The room buzzed with chatter, parents and peers wandering from table to table. As he fired up his solar panel and the mirrored surface caught the light streaming through the high windows, he felt that familiar thrill and calm swirl in his chest. He wondered whether his classmates, who had laughed at him in 8th grade for dabbling in chemistry, would now stand in awe of his apparatus. But as the judges began their rounds, those peers avoided his table. They ducked behind banners, feigned interest in the glittering robotics projects, and whispered to each other as they passed by. A girl from his calculus class, Jasmine, rolled her eyes over her shoulder as her friend pointed at the device. "Here comes Captain Save the World." Nate exhaled, deflating as though someone had punctured a balloon. When the principal gave his brief opening remarks and invited students to field questions, Nate cleared his throat and began. He spoke clearly about the condenser's efficiency, the heat transfer rates he had calculated, and the design's potential for rural distribution. He asked the audience to imagine children drinking clean water instead of waterborne diseases ravaging villages. He clicked through his slides, hoping to capture imaginations. A small cluster of parents nodded approvingly, scribbling notes. But as he finished and stepped back, the judges moved on quickly, leaving him to watch other projects garner applause and interest. His heart pounded as he hovered by his table, longing for more attention. At the end of the session, his project was given an honorable mention. No grant, no applause, just a polite handshake from one of the judges who said, "Nice work, kid." He packed up his prototype, shoulders rounded with disappointment, and processed the harsh realization that effort and vision might still not be enough to command respect. In the weeks that followed, he kept to his routines, attending classes, visiting the lab after school, tweaking small components on his prototype, and helping Carlos debug code for a robotics project. Yet he felt a hollow ache whenever he passed by empty desks in the hallway, recalling the celebration he had hoped for. He began questioning whether his dream was naive. Maybe desalination at the high school level was unattainable. His grades slipped. The once thrilling challenge of physics problems felt monotonous. His teachers noticed the dimming spark. Ms. Patel mentioned counseling resources, and his parents gently suggested he take a break. He responded with polite nods but couldn't bring himself to abandon his ambitions. Then came a turning point. In early December, his older cousin Marcus invited him to speak at a small community event organized by a nonprofit called Water for All. The event was modest: a local church basement, long folding tables lining the walls, a handful of pamphlets on clean water initiatives, and a few volunteers distributing peanut butter sandwiches. When Nate arrived, carrying a battered cardboard box with his prototype nestled inside, he expected only polite interest. Yet as he demonstrated how the solar panel powered the pump and how the condensed water dripped into a beaker, the volunteers crowded around, fired questions about durability, cost, and scalability. One woman, a nurse who had worked in rural clinics, exclaimed, "If this works, it could save lives in the villages where I served in Uganda." Another, the local pastor, nodded thoughtfully and said, "Small steps, Nathaniel. This could be the seed of something much larger." They offered to connect him with a trusted engineer who could help him refine his design. As he packed up his box afterward, Marcus slapped him on the back. "Man, you've got something special here. Don't ever let those kids in that showcase fool you. Sometimes you just have to find the right audience." Nate realized that while his peers had boycotted him at school, he had overlooked the possibility of a broader community, people outside the narrow world of his high school, who appreciated his efforts. Buoyed by that encouragement, he threw himself into his project with renewed vigor. He spent winter break poring over engineering textbooks he borrowed from the local public library, leafing through pages on desalination techniques, heat transfer, and fluid dynamics. He collaborated remotely with Marcus's engineer friend, Paul, who suggested replacing the aluminum frame with a 3D printed composite to reduce weight. He recruited Carlos and Alyssa to help him fabricate new parts. Carlos laser-cut plastic sheets into precise shapes for the parabolic mirror supports, while Alyssa used her knowledge of coding to create a simple microcontroller-based system that optimized the pump's operation based on ambient light sensors, overnights illuminated by a single LED lamp. The four of them huddled in Nate's basement workshop, energized by laughter and the hum of machinery. The Christmas lights strung along the rafters cast a warm glow on their focused faces. By the time winter thaw arrived in March, their revised prototype was slimmer, more efficient, and sturdier. On a chilly late March morning, Maplewood Junior High announced the Spring Community Innovation Day, a new event open not only to students, but to local residents and alumni. The aim was to foster community engagement, celebrate ingenuity, and raise funds for charitable causes through bake sales, donation jars, and pledges. When Nathaniel learned of the event, his heart raced. He seized his chance. No longer confined to the skeptical eyes of his classmates, he would present before a community including former alumni, neighborhood leaders, and local business owners. He spent the following weeks refining his promotional materials: vinyl banners explaining solar desalination for all, pamphlets in English and Spanish, and business cards listing his contact information, and a link to a simple website he built that detailed the device's specifications and potential impact. Every afternoon, he posted bright, colorful flyers on community bulletin boards, at the library, the grocery store, the church vestibule, ensuring that parents, grandparents, and neighbors knew to attend. On the morning of the event, he arrived bright and early at the school's multi-purpose room, now filled with rows of folding chairs, handshake tables groaning with homemade brownies and jars of lemonade, and a long stage illuminated by portable spotlights. Students from various grades had built small robots, crafted artistic displays of renewable energy, and erected dioramas depicting climate change effects. At one end of the room, Nate unloaded his gleaming prototype, now branded with a hand-painted logo, Aquasol. He set up next to banners donated by a local sign shop, where bold letters declared, "Solar-powered water purifier, transforming sunlight into life." A stack of clear vials lined the table, each containing water samples. A cloudy gray mix from a nearby creek, a brackish solution mimicking seawater, and crystal clear tears of condensation from his device. He stepped back, wiped his palms on his jeans, and straightened his printed presentation slides on a modest laptop perched on a podium. As the event kicked off, local residents wandered the exhibits, clutching paper plates and sipping lemonade. Mayor Thompson gave brief remarks about the importance of community-driven innovation, encouraging everyone to vote for the People's Choice Award. Each attendee received a ballot to assign 10 points spread among the projects they found most promising. Nate listened to the applause and chatter ripple through the room, his pulse quickening as he noticed several neighbors stopping by his table. Mrs. Hernandez, the elderly woman who lived 2 doors down, had stood alongside his father at a PTA fundraiser years ago. She tapped at her walker on the floor and asked gently, "Nathaniel, how does the solar panel last when the sun dips behind clouds?" Nate described the low-voltage battery backup he had integrated, ensuring steady operation even in partial shade. Her nod of understanding and her beaming smile gave him a surge of confidence. Nearby, a local journalist from the Maplewood Gazette, Ms. Ramirez, took notes and filmed short clips of his device in action. "This could be the first high school-based solution our town sponsors," she remarked, her tone respectful and warm. Parents hovered behind their children, reminding them to be polite. Yet several kids pressed forward, pressing their small hands against the glass housing, mesmerized by the gentle drip of distilled water. One middle schooler asked, "Can I drink it?" Nate unscrewed the vial lid and handed him a small sip. The boy's eyes widened, and he exclaimed, "It's sweet!" Laughter and applause rippled across the room. When the formal presentation began on stage, Nate took a deep breath and approached the podium. Facing the rows of chairs, he felt his pulse thundering in his ears, but he squared his shoulders and began, "Good morning. My name is Nathaniel Hayes, and I'm here to present Aquasol, a solar-powered water purification device designed to bring clean drinking water to communities in need." He clicked the remote, and his slides illuminated the screen. A world map, highlighting coastal regions facing water scarcity, diagrams of his solar concentrator, graphs showing water output versus sun intensity. He spoke clearly about the science, how concentrated sunlight raised the water's temperature enough to vaporize, how condensed vapor yielded potable water, and how low-cost materials kept construction costs under $50 per unit. He described how the average device could produce up to 3 liters of water per hour, under direct sun, enough to meet the daily drinking requirements for a small family. He ended by stating, "With community support, we can manufacture and distribute these devices, one community at a time, transforming sunlight into life." The audience responded with warm applause, and when he stepped off stage, several neighbors offered to help fund his first batch of 5 units. Others offered their old solar panels, plastic tubing, and non-toxic sealant. His heart swelled. As the voting closed and ballots were tallied, announcements began. First, Best Artistic Display, Grade 7 Robotics Club. Polite applause. Best Theoretical Presentation, Ms. Lewis's Chemistry Project. Applause. Finally, and the winner of the People's Choice Award is Aquasol by Nathaniel Hayes. The room erupted in cheers. Classmates who had ignored him months ago now rushed forward, clapping him on the back, thrusting smartphone cameras inches from his face. He shook hands and signed autographs with a humble smile, the astonished expressions on their faces as glittering as the sunlight catch on his parabolic mirrors. When Miss Ramirez approached to interview him for her paper, his voice was steady and vibrant. "I just want to show that if you have an idea and work hard on it, you don't have to wait for permission to change the world." Walking home afterward, his backpack loaded with notes, small donations for solar panels, and notes of congratulations, he passed the corridor where a few ninth graders lingered. One of them, who had once sneered at his 8th grade science project, now offered a shy thumbs up as Nate walked by. Nate nodded in return, not out of triumph, but recognition that people can change. When he stepped into his house, Aunt Louise greeted him with a tight hug and said, "I'm so proud of you, son." His mother wiped tears from her eyes, and his father held his hand as though wanting to convey love and admiration through bone and solace. That night, Nate pinned the People's Choice ribbon on his bedroom wall next to his old spiral notebooks, each a testament to years of trial and error. Over the following weeks, word of his achievements spread beyond Maplewood. The Maplewood Gazette ran a front-page story. Local teens solar desalination wins community award. College offers listed. High school guidance counselors approached him with letters from top universities offering scholarships. In engineering, a professor from MIT invited him to attend a summer pre-college program. A local tech entrepreneur offered to mentor him and provide seed money for his nonprofit initiative. If 6 months ago he had felt small and unseen, now he felt the world opening before him. Each new opportunity a door made possible by persistent dedication. As his senior year drew to a close, he completed his final capstone report for advanced physics, an enhanced version of Aquasol, now featuring a modular design that allowed for easy component replacement and scale-up for larger communities. He added an optional wind turbine attachment for days with scant sunlight. The report's appendix overflowed with empirical data collected from field tests he had organized. Villagers from the coastal town of Harborview had installed his systems and reported significant decreases in waterborne illnesses within 2 months. Testimonials from grateful families lined the final pages. When he submitted the report to Mrs. Carlson, she paused, eyes scanning the glossy pages and his refined diagrams, before looking up with an uncharacteristic softness. "Nathaniel, you've done remarkable work. I underestimated you." She pressed her lips together, nodded, and signed her approval. It was a moment of closure, a final acknowledgement from the teacher, whose earlier disbelief had cut so deeply. On graduation day, as he stood on stage with his classmates, wearing his cap and gown, he felt a tap on his shoulder. Turning, he saw Mrs. Carlson, her eyes bright behind her glasses. She pressed a small envelope into his hand, a letter of commendation from the school district, and a voucher for lab equipment. "Thank you for teaching me the value of perseverance," he said, voice thick with gratitude. She smiled shyly in response. The auditorium echoed with applause as he received his diploma, an ordinary sheet of paper, but in his mind, a gateway to uncounted possibilities. As he walked off stage, he glimpsed his friends, family, and community leaders rising in unison, cheering his name. He raised his hand in a small, humble wave. The embodied realization that though something as simple as classmates boycotting his first presentation had once felt devastating, that setback had been the catalyst for a journey of growth, community, engagement, and eventual sweeping recognition. Looking ahead, he saw a future shimmering with promise. Acceptance letters to prestigious universities, plans for his nonprofit initiative, Aquasol Worlds, and a lifelong commitment to harnessing science for the betterment of humanity. In that moment, standing beneath a cascade of confetti and applause, he understood that true triumph lies not in the absence of rejection, but in the unwavering choice to forge ahead, to refine one's vision, and to transform isolation into standing. Ovations that resonate long after the final echo of applause has faded.